Hello, friends. My name is Jennifer Long, and I currently pastor a church in Corning, New York, Emmanuel Lutheran. And I'm here with my two fantastic colleagues, Reverend Mike Troutman, honorably retired, coming to us from near St. Louis, Missouri, and Reverend Steve Langford, coming to us from near Arlington, Texas, also honorably retired. Someday I aspire to be honorably retired myself, but that is not this day. We're looking at some of the wisdom passages, biblical passages. And so today we're working on Ecclesiastes, verses from chapter 1 and from chapter 3, which will be very familiar.
So beginning with Ecclesiastes 1, the words of the teacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. I think originally it was the words of the preacher, but the NRSV changes it to the teacher. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its currents the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, the ear is not filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, for there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. For the people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. Ow.
That's bleak.
Humbug. So if you're of a particular age, you will know this. It was made popular in the general world by a song by the Byrds called Turn, Turn, Turn. And so I'm reading from Ecclesiastes 3. For everything, there's a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time of love and a time for hate, and a time for war and a time for peace.
And as the Byrds said, I pray it's not too late.
And I am continuing in the verses that follow that to the end of the chapter. What gain have the workers from their toils? I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken away from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already is, and God seeks out what has gone by. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice wickedness was there, and in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there as well. I said to myself, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for he has appointed a time for every matter and for every work. Here ends the reading.
Mm.
The word that comes to mind is what I hear so many people say that I have a hard time embracing. God is in control. And that suggests we as human beings have very little influence or power.
I feel like this tends to go either way. Either I'm a pull myself up by my bootstraps person and it's all in my control, or it's all in God's control. And I don't, again, this is an either or choice, and I don't think either's a fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sovereignty of God versus human free will.
Yeah.
And what's the balance between those?
Or
And
is there
historically,
balance? Is it just sometimes out of balance?
Yeah.
I was thinking too, as you were talking, Steve, that there are certain language that gets under my skin. One of them is there's a reason for everything that happens, or everything happens for a reason. I don't think that's true. And one of the ways I've tried to think about it for myself is I also kind of hear that as God makes everything happen for a reason, which I think is just complete garbage, or words that I can't say if this recording is going to be posted someplace. You all can figure out what that is, or think in your heads the word you would like to insert there. But and so I spent a lot of time thinking about that years ago, and the thing I came out with is I don't believe everything happens for a reason, but I do believe that God can bring reason to everything that happens.
and that's the perspective that Paul brings in Romans 8, that it's not that God causes all things to work for good, but rather God works in all things for good. Yeah. Which honors our human free will while also honoring the sovereignty of God.
And, I guess I would add, because I have to be contrarian about life.
Of course you do.
It says thou shalt not kill. But then it says here in the scripture that there's a time to kill. Now, I'm sure some of our friends would say, well, they're talking about animals, blah, 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 not people, obviously. Or as a justification for a military, they could say that. But I think that's all overreaching about what this text is about. I think what this text about is a way of trying to come to terms with the world we live in, and to be people who believe that there's something better and yet see the hurt and pain that exist. And so I don't think this is an answer book that gives us solutions for the difficulties that we face. But what it does, it talks about, I think, in the collective wisdom of the Middle East, a way of coping, a way of having a little flexibility, a way of to let the sadness of life flow through, but then to talk about what joy may look like as human beings. So I think it really is a very complicated way of trying to come to peace with what is and what we hope to be, or what will be.
How do we make sense of the world as it is, of life as it is, without it driving us crazy?
I was thinking of two things. One, that this it's less trying to ease things up and more trying to grab a reality view of the world. These things all happen, and there's times for each of them. Although it's really poetic reality view of the world. But I was also thinking about how the two texts, the Exodus, you shall not kill, and this, there's a time to kill, those serve different purposes. that the Exodus text was about how we live in relationship and community as humans. And this is more addressing how the world looks.
Yep.
That the texts have different purposes. I was also thinking about how well I know 3:1-8. I mean, I can probably sing that bird song. Nobody needs that to actually happen, and how the invitation for me is to look at the 1-11 and then 9-17, which I think I said was the end of the chapter, is in fact not the end of the chapter. I was wrong about that. But I don't know that I don't see it as Steve did, or I forget who said it was harsh or something like that, that people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come. I mean, I think there's some truth to that. There are certain historical figures we all remember. But, you go back more than 4 or 5 generations in my family, I can't tell you those people's names.
Nope.
I don't remember what they did. I think to some extent, who they were, how they lived, how they related with one another probably still lives in me and my family. But I don't remember the individuals per se.
Yeah.
And yet, the way this verse begins is vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And what is it what's the suggested thinking about what one's want? What do I want written in my obituary when I die? What do you want to be in the dash between the years? And I'm not really sure I'm that important. I believe I am pretty important to the people who are part of my life right now. But I'm not sure in the grand scheme of the whole world I am that important, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
Yeah. I think it's a Greek story that tells a story of a great Persian or Assyrian emperor, I forget which, who builds this great statue in the desert that tells who he is and of his powers and of his might during that time. And the story ends with the sands and time wearing the thing down to nothing. And the Greek commentator on the story, telling the story, leaves you with a sense that all the greatness of this person is lost to the world in some ways. And I think that's true. So we're not all that important, the great scope of things, but we are important in the ways like those before us who lives on in us, have made differences in ways that probably wouldn't be written in history books, but in ways that are etched on lives from generation to generation. So the vanity is thinking we're important, but the reality is that we believe lives matter and that what we do in this world matters, even if it's not remembered by anyone.
Yeah.
Except God.
Except God. Man, God's got a lot to remember.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think, one of my metaphors for talking about God is God is memory. Because I think it's not that God remembers, but it may be heresy to say this. I think the acts impact of our lives impact the life of God. And that's God. It's embodied in God.
Yeah. I guess I wonder too how much that this was capturing just certain truths. I mean, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. That's kind of factual. I mean, until we blow up the earth, which certain studies suggest may be coming soon. But the sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. That's just kind of capturing what the sun does.
I love what it says. The rivers flow into the sea, but the sea never gets full.
Yeah.
But then it applies it to saying, my ear never gets full of hearing, and my eye of seeing. There's always more that I'm wanting.
Steve, your ear never gets full and my mouth never gets empty. I'm just saying.
And there you go.
Wow.
Yeah. What I see in the chapter 3 is he calls us beyond the either or. We tend to choose one or the other and say, and he says, no, we got to embrace it all. It's all a part of life. And wisdom is when we stop fighting against some parts and just say, okay, that's it. That's a part of life. How do I deal with it? How do I live in the midst of it?
And to Mike's point about stuff that matters to God, it's in that end part that you're referencing, Steve, that which is already has been, that which is to be already is, and God seeks out what has gone by. I don't know why I've not spent more time with that particular verse. I feel like I need to make that into a bumper sticker, tattoo it on my forehead or on my arm or something where I can see it.
If you were younger, Jen, you would do that.
Wow, we got to talk about I'm not being young enough. Okay, let's go there.
Yeah.
I have two.
It is I want to say this is the creative imagination of a people rooted in the world and rooted in God. So it is an imaginative act to write these words. And sometimes it's an act of faith. I mean, it really is hey, life is mierda, friends, but there's happiness and joy. It's difficult. It's just because you're God's chosen people don't mean everything's going to work out all right, or life's going to roll your way, or the Red Sea will part all the time when your time of trouble comes. It ain't happening.
So like every little thing's not
Yeah,
gonna
will
be all right.
Yes. Honoring the late Bob Marley.
Here's what I was just thinking about, is if it's an imaginative act to write those words, is it also an imaginative act to live them? And what does that look like as people of faith?
That's a great question.
How do we embrace what is, change what can be changed, and trust that God in the midst of it?
This is getting a little bit close to the serenity prayer, I'm just saying.
And how do we not despair?
Yeah.
And be stuck in that despair, this era of despairing. I think it tells me that life's hard. Sometimes we get caught in that hardness and we can be stuck there, or we can, through the help and love of other folks, have a more inclusive picture of what can be. We know what is. God knows what can be, but what will happen. And you live out of a sense of promise. I mean, I think that's for someone who can just get who has in the past, like, what the heck, what difference have I made as a pastor, as a father, as a spouse, as a friend? What harm have I done? And get stuck in that stuff. But this verse, at least these verses invite me to peek my head up and have some promise in my life.
And I think too, it's that eternal question of how do we live How do we think about when bad things happen? When we face challenge? And I don't want to go too simple with, oh, it's just an opportunity to grow, which I believe, but that's not all it is. And, the reality is that life has ups and downs. And compared to some others, my downs have been pretty minor.
Yeah.
Compared to some others, my downs have been horrific. This is just the one particular life I was given. And is it Mary Oliver who says, what is it that you're going to do with your one, I'm forgetting, strange and beautiful life or something like that. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. Hey, it's interesting, Jen. What do you think? Because if you read these things, like in 3, we would say one's bad and one's good. But suppose this neutralize all tendencies to rate things as bad and good.
Yeah.
To give a negative valence to one and a
I-
positive valence to another. What if they just
are?
Yeah,
just
that's
are?
exactly what I think, that this is what life looks like. And I think I could even take this if I was really in the mood to be creative and say, all right, what are the seasons I would put in that I have maybe experienced? And can I think of them on a scale and put them out at valences and then look at that carefully and say, how have they been different? Or how are they not a bad and good end of the scale? Here are some things. Could I do everything has its time in Jennifer Long's life, in Jennifer Long's last 3 months? There was a time to do this and a time to do that, a time to do this and a time to do that. And then could I look at them in a way that's different than thinking of them as just good and bad?
Yeah.
Well, I'm at the stage of life where it says there's a time to throw away. It's called downsizing when you get into retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've talked about this, Jen, in another venue, talking about like the scale of differentiation between 0 and 100. And we want a tendency to say, well, those people on the lower end of the scale obviously are those people who've been most harmed by life or are most damaged by life. And the people on the other side of the thing are the ones who have, through whatever, are on the good side of their life. So I wonder if there's like it just on the scale, the things you would like to have happen and things you don't want to have happen to you, somehow just to neutralize that tendency, which happens. And, we may not think it's important, but it really happens in the world we live in, of those who are worthy and those who are not worthy. So we have states all over the country who have cut Medicare retirements, Medicaid, standards, and have deemed people whose lives are on the struggle side of the fence as somehow not worthy of receiving the benefits of the society that we live in. They're not worthy. So I think these things really do matter, how we characterize them, how we look at them, because they have true life impact on the people who are most vulnerable in life.
Yeah, and I tend to think, even like when we're talking about scale of differentiation, that in a family, levels that are lower and higher are intimately related to one another.
Yeah.
That if my level is higher, that to some extent that may be on the back of somebody else whose level is lower or who is more vulnerable family. And that's a challenge and hard for me to think about, but I think that's the case.
That's certainly true economically.
Sure.
Not on the scale of differentiation, but I would say economically and socially as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's the benefit to the narrative, that I've pulled myself up by my bootstraps, because then if we're trying to economics, what I can think about is the fact that I've earned this, so I deserve it. It's about deserving as opposed to, I don't know what it would be as opposed to, but it becomes about deserving. I think I want it to be about something else. I'm going to give more thought to that.
Which is a way of saying I'm better than.
And believe it or not, we have once again come to the end of our time together. Steve, would you be willing to pray us out?
Sure, sure. So let's pray together. And so we confess to you, merciful God, that in our humanness, we struggle. We struggle to understand how to do this life. We struggle with the harshness that life sometimes is. We struggle to know ourselves and to have a sense of what difference do we make in the world. And so we pray that in the midst of our having ears that can't get full and eyes that can't see enough, that you would give us a glimpse of you, that we might rest in you and your faithfulness and your love that never abandons us or gives up on us, that we might find our peace in trusting you, is our prayer in the name of Christ. Amen.
And
Peace, friends.
peace.
Peace to you.